Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts. Hello and welcome back. How are you this week, Kirsty?
I'm great, thanks, Belle. I stayed at the newly opened Le Méridien Melbourne this week, which is located up the Paris end of town, right next to Parliament House. And in fact, you can actually see it from the Parliament House, that is. You can see it from the heated rooftop pool on level 5, which is just a gorgeous space with a bar. And there's also a sleek ground floor European-inspired restaurant called Dolly, and the dishes are inspired by film and theatre, so they're art on a plate.
Oh, amazing. Hey, didn't you also stay at the Royce Hotel in St Kilda, right near the Botanic Gardens as well?
I did stay there fairly recently, yes.
You get around.
The Royce Hotel is just stunning, aptly named, because it's the former Rolls-Royce showroom, so it's a really special space. They designed it to keep sort of the opulence of that you'd expect in the historic luxury car showroom that it used to be. And the lobby is home to these large circular columns of silver panelled chrome, and it was a deliberate design effect to replicate the grille on the front of a Rolls-Royce car. Very clever.
Oh, cool.
Our room was on the 6th floor, and so you walk down this hallway and you press a button and these automatic curtains open up to this just lush green gardens, and the rooms are massive. So big lounge area, marble coffee table, and there was a bottle of Tatton just sitting there waiting for us.
Nice.
And the restaurant's amazing too. It's called the Showroom, and it has these really large booths where you can sit and just watch the trams go by. So it's just a really quintessential Melbourne stay.
Oh, that sounds awesome. You know, it's incredible to see how many new or seriously refurbed hotels have opened in Melbourne in the last couple of years. Incredibly, in 2021, which was our second COVID year here in Victoria, more than 10 new hotels opened in the city centre. And that includes big hitters such as Mövenpick, Next Hotel in the W Melbourne. And last year is the year that I've dubbed the year of the 3- and 4-star hotel. And that's where we saw Voco in Melbourne Central and the two towers, AC by Marriott and Oakwood, face off against each other on the city's fringe, you know, in South Melbourne.
Yeah, and this year, 2023 obviously, we have already had the opening of Ritz-Carlton, Dorset Melbourne, and as we've already mentioned, Le Méridien, and that's added more than 800 rooms to the city.
Amazing. And if you're on a budget too, I would suggest that you keep an eye out on Holiday Inn, which is on an expansion run. I stayed at the new Holiday Inn Express beside Southern Cross Station, and it was super convenient, had guest laundries, really practical rooms that fitted in all the conveniences you'd expect in a large hotel, but without the big price tag. And they just opened in Dandenong if you're out that way, and a second property in Geelong is opening too. And down the Dockland end of town, Dorset also opened in April this year with a heated indoor pool and a bistro. There's a gin bar where you can get a sneaky signature cocktail.
Nice.
A sneaky cocktail.
Always up for those sneaky cocktails. And talking Docklands, it's also seeing there's some massive development going on down there. In fact, you and I both stayed at the new Nasuto Docklands earlier this year, in separate apartments, of course, because we were with our kids.
No one wants to share with them.
Stunning apartment hotel, and it's right in the entertainment precinct of District Docklands. And I had a 2-bedroom apartment which had everything you need for a family. And the first thing my 14-year-old said when we walked in was, "I want an apartment like this when I'm older." So there you go. The tick of approval from the teen. It's got a lounge and smart TVs, and as I said, it's in that great entertainment precinct. So there's movie theatres, ice skating rink, trick art gallery, Artvo, and Archie's Brothers Cirque Electro, with its bumper cars and arcades and bowling alley.
Oh, I know the kids had loads of fun on that, but you and I gave those motorbike rides a pretty good go too, Kirsty. I think, did I win? Sorry,
You definitely gave
I just
me a
outed you. Yeah. And Nasuto was a great find. And TFE has also announced another new property in Docklands, Jewel Hotels Collection by TFE, and A by Adina, which will have Australia's largest rooftop infinity pool.
Amazing properties there. Where else would you want to go for a little urban mini break when you've got choices like that?
Yeah, a little staycation. I'm actually going to give the last word to Lee Davey, who's from Ridges, Melbourne, which has had that significant, which is an older property and had one of the significant refurbs, and right in the theatre district. So I had a quick chat to Lee, who has an interesting take on the enormous growth of the Melbourne hotel scene.
I think Melbourne is incredibly resilient, and I think it's not only do the additional hotels that we're seeing come into the market play a significant part, showcasing that some of the great brands globally are coming into Melbourne. I think there's absolutely no doubt that Ridges Melbourne and our new transformation complements that investment into Melbourne in terms of another great hotel in the CBD, and for us, we've been here for many years. With a really strong loyalty and fan base that I think that it adds value to Melbourne, and I think that Melbourne's only continuing to grow as a city also. So there's just so much always in the pipeline for Melbourne through key events and what our Melbourne Convention Bureau does such too. So Melbourne just seems to go from strength to strength every time and has been incredibly resilient. So I think that's probably the main reason for that.
Right, so who are you chatting to this week, Belle?
I'm going to introduce you to Alison Greer, who's the founder of a new company called GoKinda. It's an accommodation booking platform with a green tinge. Take a listen. Welcome to the show, Alison. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Belle. Thank you for having me.
Well, now you are the founder of GoKinda, which is a new hotel booking service that, in your words, promotes stylish, conscious stays. Do people actually think about sustainability when they're booking their holiday?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Every year, the major travel companies publish sustainability reports, and year on year on year, we've been seeing improvements in people's intentions to travel more sustainably. But I think there's a really big gap still between, we call it this say and do gap. So people say they want to travel more more sustainably, but they're not quite there yet. So we're hoping that GoKinda can make it easier for people to do that, because I think that's one of the sticking points at the moment.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess we're all thinking about recycling and those sorts of small things that we do in our local environment. But then when you go on holiday, it's like, it just gets thrown out the window when we lap up all of the luxury and just leave our cares behind us. I mean, how unique are you is the question, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, firstly, we totally agree with you. The thing about travel, it is our most sacred time. It's the time we have to unwind, to step away from our real world. So we're wanting to try and find a way that we can preserve that experience while also doing better for people on the planet. So that's at the core of what we're trying to achieve. But yes, at the moment, we are the first booking platform in Australia completely dedicated to supporting conscious hotels and not just offering a conscious collection on the side. We're also the first committed to putting style and sustainability side by side. So we handpick our hotels to be equal parts planet-friendly and chic. I think the other thing that further sets us apart is that we're trying to occupy a space that is in that middle ground. You know, the large OTAs are starting to do more things in this space, and there are other really sort of bougie boutique operators that cover that high-end sustainability. We're trying to sit in the middle. So there are some various iterations out there, but we're pretty confident that we have found a little niche to carve out for ourselves here in the Australian market.
Oh, well, amazing. So how long have you been working on it? The question is, was it a COVID baby?
Well, I had a real COVID baby, and then I had this COVID baby. So I guess I've kind of got two there.
Oh, my goodness.
They both took about the same time, about a year to create. So, yeah, I've been working on GoKinda for about a year, so it's really exciting to finally have it in market.
Oh, brilliant. And so how many hotels do you have listed with GoKinda, and what's the geographic spread?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we are for Australian travellers. That's our priority at the moment. So we have about 450 hotels, and we've prioritised destinations that we know Australians love to travel. So those year-round destinations that Australians love, so Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, they're really well represented. We've also got a great range in the Maldives, in key European destinations, and also in major US cities. And we're looking to bring on a whole bunch more, actually in the not too distant future, that we're really excited to share soon.
Right, so that's interesting. I mean, it is kind of interesting to hear that places. I mean, of course, Bali is, one of our best loved overseas destinations.
Yeah.
But then also, it is also one of the places that, because we've loved it, we've possibly loved it too hard, and maybe not too well. So, is there a concentration of properties in one particular region?
Yeah, look, I'm definitely guilty of being a big Bali lover, so I'm very keen to expand our collection outside of what most people typically think of when they go to Bali. I've been lucky to get out to Sumba and some of the more remote parts of Indonesia, so we'd love to see more hotels in that space, and we're working on that. But some of the other things that I've learnt through this process is countries like the Maldives that are so vulnerable to the effects of climate change are unsurprisingly really focused on doing what they can to minimise their impact and look after their fragile environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Europe is also, they're so much further ahead than we are in this space, and it's quite common for hotels to embrace eco certifications as a way to move the needle. We're not quite there yet, I wouldn't say.
Well, that was actually my question. What makes an eco hotel eco? And when you're travelling the world, how can you tell that the hotel is an eco hotel, given that not that very long ago you would not find and still now you won't even find split recycling in hotel rooms?
Yeah, it's so complicated, and look, it's really the reason why I created GoKinda, to try to make it simpler. There's a couple of things there. I mean, yes, there are the things that you'll notice on your travels, whether there are single-use plastics in use and, like you said, recycling bins. But it's actually the things that you can't see that probably make the biggest difference. So a hotel running on renewable energy, for example, is probably the most impactful thing that a hotel could do, and there's really no way as a guest that you would even know that is happening. So it makes it really tricky.
Yeah, and I suppose, and as you say, that's the whole reason why you've created GoKinda. So I wanted to ask then, we're talking about the Maldives, we're talking about Bali, we're talking about, flying up to, flying to Darwin or to Perth, which are all, we're flying everywhere. How do you balance that stay of, the idea that you're staying in an environmentally sustainable or friendly property, but you've got to balance it with the inevitable fact that you've got to fly to get to those locations. I mean, given that flying accounts for something like 2.5% of global CO2 emissions, and I know that the European Commission had stated that the aviation sector comprises nearly 14% of all emissions from transport. So, if aviation was a country, it'd rank in the top 10 emitters. So how do you make that? How do you make that balance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I tried to actually find where I read this before this, but I can't actually find it. But something really interesting I read was that aviation still requires a lot of innovation and development to actually get us to a net zero result over a period of time, whereas hotels, the technology exists to get there. It's just time, investment, etc. So that's why we've decided to focus on hotels, because it is something that can improve at a more rapid rate. But one of the best things we always think of when we think about saving on your flying is make your holidays longer if you can, which I think is always a great idea.
Oh, I'm totally on board with that one.
Yeah. So travel for longer and travel less is the general message. The less flying you do, obviously, the better. Stay longer.
I suppose so. And two, I guess if you've got a number of properties, staying longer doesn't mean you just stay in the one place. You're moving around a region where you can change to other forms of transport as well.
Yeah.
And I think that growth in train travel, it's such a big trend internationally as well as, in Australia not so much, although we do have, some of the world's most epic train journeys here. I love the idea too, though, that we're talking about sustainability, but it's not all earnest. The other S word in GoKinda is style, which is, and I've been going through your website, gokinda.com.au, and you have some properties I've stayed at are just the most beautiful places on the planet.
Yeah.
They are brilliant. Some of them are also very pricey places that I've stayed at. Can you do eco hotels on a budget and still get that absolute beauty that we all want when we're staying somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was at the foundation of our purpose and something we really wanted to prove, because traditionally most people have considered eco hotel options to be at the really high end or the other extreme where, you're dealing with bugs and no luxuries whatsoever. So we really want to try and prove that there is a middle ground. We are working on a range that will prove that more than what we have right now. However, there are some destinations that we have on the site already that I feel like offer a really good range of that mid sort of price. So, for example, Thailand is doing it really, really well, and Thailand seems to be having a bit of a moment, so that would be somewhere to have a look at.
Okay. Whereabouts in Thailand would you say?
Oh, I think Koh Samui has had some beautiful new hotels open, actually during COVID. So there's some really new and exciting hotels opened on the island. And when they're new or when they're renovated, they've been able to consider sustainability from day one. So some of those things that I mentioned before that you can't necessarily see in your stay are easier to introduce when you're renovating or building from scratch.
All right, okay. And so so when you talk about a mid-range, what would you say? I mean, you can go up into the thousands, but where would you put your average price point? Is it possible to say that for the properties that you've got on there? I know they vary so wildly, but do you have a midpoint that you could suggest to listeners?
I would say it depends very much on destinations. Mm-hmm. So Thailand, for example, I would say is probably around the $250 to $300 mark per night. Bali at the moment, our range is at the higher end than we would like, but we're working really, really hard to bring on some more affordable options, and that's a real priority for us. It's just going to take us a little bit of time. And then in Australia, I think that's sometimes something we forget, but city stays, there are better options in our major cities. I always say you don't need to go to Costa Rica or to Africa to get a better hotel experience or a more conscious hotel experience. There are conscious hotels in our major cities, and I think really looking at those options, and they are no more expensive than some of the other options available. So that is often a really good place to start, and often that's where we're travelling more often. So the frequency is a factor as well.
Yeah, so we can start in our own backyards, basically.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Now, the question that we ask all our guests is, what is your most bizarre travel experience? And I hope you've had to think about this one, because there are so many.
There are, but it's funny when you're forced to think about this, they suddenly all disappear from your head. But the one that I most recall is when we were in Havana. My partner and I really wanted to catch a local baseball game, but in Cuba there's very little internet, so it's really quite tricky. So I saw some locals watching a baseball game in a bar, and I asked them in my very, very poor Spanish where we might be able to find a game, and incredibly one of them offered to take us. So we ended up sharing this beat up 50s taxi with our new friend and another stranger for an hour-long drive out of Havana. So we were at this game. It was fantastic. We were the only non-locals there. There was a big brass band and peanuts in paper bag. Like, it was just an incredible experience. But the game ended up running late and our ride left because it was getting dark and the car didn't have headlights. So if you've ever seen the cars going around Cuba, you would understand. So after more than an hour of negotiations, there's definitely no Ubers in Cuba, we ended up in another random car with 4 other strangers, including a small child, making detours and drop-offs the whole way back to Havana. So it was bizarre, but one of the most unforgettable days I've had.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that's so good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your travel experience in Cuba, and also congratulations on the creation of GoKinda. We wish you all the very best.
That was Alison Greer, whose new company GoKinda is a collection of stylish and sustainable hotels around Australia and the world. And if you'd like to learn more, visit gokinda.com.au or check the show notes on our website, theworldawaits.au.
Our tip this week is about travel insurance. Wait, it's not that boring or that difficult. The tip is to buy your travel insurance at the same time as you book your holiday. The insurance coverage starts on the same date as your holiday, but as you've taken it out beforehand, it will cover you before you travel if you have to cancel for whatever reason. So let's just say you were booked to visit the Greek island of Rhodes and then the wildfires broke out and you couldn't go. If you'd booked your travel insurance ahead of the event, you're covered for any cancellation or change of plans.
Good.
Yeah, so I had a quick chat with NIB Travel Insurance about it, and they said that seeing particularly all the recent natural disasters like hurricanes in the US should remind travellers to book insurance at the same time that they book their hotel or tour arrangements or flights. Of course, it also covers you if you have to cancel or postpone, for illness or other events. And what spokesperson Dana Patterson told me was that, so the thing to remember is that cancellation cover starts from the moment that you buy the policy, not when your trip starts. And, the thing is too, if there is a hurricane or a wildfire or something like that that's been identified, it's no longer an unexpected event. So your travel insurance may not cover you if you have to cancel.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Travellers still believe the Australian government would ensure they get medical treatment if they need it overseas, and almost half believe the government will pay their medical bills. So when in fact, if you do end up really injured or sick overseas, you'll be footing the hospital bill and the cost of flying home. So if you're really unlucky, that can cost you or your family hundreds of thousands of dollars. And tragically, we have seen those awful stories, really sad stories of people having to set up GoFundMe pages to get their loved ones home when they've had some sort of serious medical emergency. So it's another reason to make sure you have an adequate level of insurance and also read the fine print carefully.
Yeah, I mean, relying on the Australian government to pay your medical bills is not a reliable backup plan.
But the good news is Australia does have some reciprocal healthcare agreements with several countries, New Zealand, of course, Belgium, Finland, Italy, Norway, Ireland, Sweden and the UK. And if you have Medicare, you can get subsidised treatment for emergency services in those and some other countries. But have a look to see the list of the countries and for some other good advice on choice.com.au.
This week, Kirsty's chatting to Nadia Plumridge, author of Lost in Florence, an award-winning guidebook about the best places to eat, drink and explore in the capital of the Tuscan region.
Welcome along, Nadia.
Hi, Kirsty. How are you today?
So great to have you chatting with us today. So let's start by tell us a bit about your background and how you got into travel.
Well, I guess I've always been a bit of an explorer from a very young age. I remember quite clearly being about 13 and watching lots of TV shows on the ABC about Europe and travel. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to go and live in Europe. So I was lucky enough when I was 15 to go on a family vacay, kind of doing the grand tour, back in the day for Aussies, where you'd go maybe to London and then to Amsterdam and Paris and through Italy. And I happened to come through Italy particularly, and I was 15 years old. And I don't know if it's kind of like serendipity or not, but I had my 15th birthday in the city of Florence. And I remember that day falling in love with the city and saying, one day I'm going to come back and live for a summer. So it all kind of stemmed from there. And then when I got a little bit older, I did move to London to go to university and study journalism. And travel's always just been a passion, like people and places. So it felt very organic to, I don't know, become a travel journalist. And here I am.
So when did you go back to Italy again after you were 15?
Yeah, so when I was living in London, it's so easy to travel. That's one of the joys of being based in the UK. It's like 2 hours and you could be in Rome, or 1 hour in Paris. So I came over quite a few times for more like a long weekend. But the kind of turning point for me was I was working in London in a creative agency, and you sort of think about sort of coming to an end of a job and the next step. And I thought, I don't want to get just into another job in the big city right now. So I went back into my little sort of box of dreams, and there was 2 things left to do. And one was like going back to Florence to live those 3 months that I promised myself when I was 15. So I literally like quit my job, packed up my London house, and moved to Florence for the not the summer. It was the autumn. It was like September, October, November, and that's kind of where it really, really started.
Wow, fantastic! I'm sure so many of us would love to do that. So, and you loved it so much, you ended up writing a book about it. So how much further down the track, did that come about?
Yeah, so that was in 2010 when I did the 3 months, and I went back to Australia for Christmas, which was kind of my annual pilgrimage back to the family in Perth. And then it was sort of there that kind of like, I don't know what's the word, when it just was sort of in my kind of blood. I was like, I haven't finished with Florence. I need to go back. And so I eventually returned in 2012, and I took like, a full-time apartment in Santo Spirito, just in the Oltrarno, which is the south side. And I kind of got into freelance writing and got really back into travel writing, because before that, when I was in London, I worked for media houses like Bauer and for creative agencies. So I basically went to Florence, and I didn't really have a big plan. All I knew in my kind of soul was like, I need to sort of be here now. So it was really exciting at the time, because although Florence is still a really magical place, I feel like 10 years ago it was slightly less touristic. And I had this amazing apartment in Old Palazzo on the Primo Piano, which is the first floor. And my living room was an old drawing room of an old palace. So if you imagine like 7-meter high ceilings with like a fresco, I turned it into like a kind of a sort of 19th century kind of salon drawing room with like long tables for dinners and a little writing desk in the corner. And that was kind of what life became. It was a bit like living in some kind of novel. And it was when I was living there, I had this idea, because I love just walking and exploring. So I'd walk around the Oltrarno and I would see all these amazing artisans, and I'd pop my head in and say ciao and find out more about them. And I was so fascinated about these craftsmen, these people that were still making amazing like jewelry or clothing, or could be some sort of something for the house. And I was like, people don't get to see this. They all go to the 3 main squares, the Piazze, like for the Duomo or the main, Piazza Signoria. And no one's exploring these little back streets. And so the concept originally, I've always been a book lover, but I started a website in 2014 called Lost in Florence. And the idea of losting is going down the back streets, get a little bit lost, and you'll discover the true essence of what a city is. And so that's where the website sort of started. And I put it into a couple of categories: wine, dine, fine. So basically eat, drink, and like shop. And the shopping part, though, is very much the artisans. Like it could be ceramics, it could be jewelry, but people that are handcrafting like beautiful products. And I'm very much into this sort of slow travel idea that I think's been around from years ago, but maybe coming back into the fore. So that's kind of where it started. And eventually, the website became quite popular organically. I didn't have a big plan, but I think other people resonated with the idea of wanting to be like explore and have a more authentic experience. And so I think, what year was it now? A couple of years ago, anyway, I got in touch with a couple of publishers, and Hardy Grant, who are one of my favourite publishers in Australia and the world with lifestyle products and books, came back and loved my concept for the book. And so they gave me a book deal, and I wrote the book, which came out in 2019.
Fantastic. And we'll put a link in the show notes, because I know it's getting a reprint as well, so it's obviously been very successful. So tell us, people who adore Italy and in particular want to go to Florence or return to Florence, what are some of the unique sort of finds that people might not know about?
That's a good question, because I think I love Italy so much, but I do see this sort of over tourism element where people come and I kind of call it the TripAdvisor effect. People get on TripAdvisor and they see the top 5 things to do and they all do the same thing. And sadly, that kind of takes away some of that kind of magic dust that does exist in the cities. So personally, you know, I'm a huge walker. So I would say, for example, if you come to Florence, do. But one of my favourite things to do is go for an evening stroll or a nighttime stroll where most of the tour groups have left. It's a bit more peaceful. And then also I would just try to find, you know, some resources. You know, my book is one that you could find. It's got like 150 venues that are more independently owned and off the beaten path. Also in Florence is an amazing English-speaking newspaper called The Florentine that has a lot of like events and new openings that's worth resourcing as well. For example, you know, being here in Tuscany at the moment and it's summertime, like they're doing amazing like films at the Bardini Gardens for €5, which are amazing. So you can go to this beautiful garden overlooking the city of Florence for €5, which is about $8 Australian. You can watch a film outside al fresco, which I think is gorgeous. And there's a lot of these kind of events that kind of do go on if you just do a bit more research, if that makes sense. But otherwise, I don't know, I'm really into the old sort of mama and papa sort of like trattoria in terms of eating, if that makes sense, like the old sort of style places that are not too stuffy or fancy. I mean, look, I'm just trying to think where I was just eating recently. Like, for example, I love the area of San Frediano in Florence, which is in the Oltrarno, which is the south side, just a little bit to the west. It's lesser travelled, but it's about 10 minutes on foot and you can be at all the major landmarks. But in this area, one of my favourite restaurants is called Trattoria del Orto, which is just family run. Orto is like the garden. So basically it's like the restaurant of the garden, meaning all the vegetables and sort of locally grown. And you just get amazing pastas and really good house wine there. And you can have an amazing meal for like €20, which is about 30 Australian dollars. And come out feeling really happy and also just being more of the locals. So I guess my advice to anyone is always just, you know, maybe if you see something like that looks really busy, don't necessarily go there. Just go down a few little back streets and pop your head into somewhere a little bit lesser travelled and you'll probably find something that no one else has discovered apart from the locals.
Amazing. And so are you doing more research while you're there now? And also, how have you found that it's changed this time around? Because you're obviously in Italy right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first question, so at the moment I'm updating my book because we're getting a new edition printed, which is fantastic. As you mentioned earlier, it's been a sellout. So I'm lucky enough to just be able to go through and double check that everything's still current or add some new venues in there as well. In terms of your second question, I mean, look, I've really seen the city evolve in the last 10 years or so. And even post sort of COVID, it's become a very popular place, even more so. Everyone I know works in the travel industry. They're all saying numbers are bumper, more than 2019. So everyone's sort of, I think, finally doing their bucket list Italy travels. But what that creates is a huge kind of number of people coming and doing a lot of the same things. So my advice to people is always do two things, really. I'm really into this idea of slow travel, which means don't just go to a place for a day, maybe stay for a night or two, where you can stay at a local sort of hotel and meet someone, you know, maybe that's run by some interesting local people and putting your money back into that community. Have a few nights to stroll in the evening and go to some great little restaurants. And even if you stay at those boutique hotels, those people running it will know all their favourite places. They're going to give you all their intel. It's a really wonderful way to explore a city. And I'm also into, and I think what the future will be is maybe don't think, for example, in Italy, you have to do Venice and Florence and Rome. There's like towns like Lucca, which are an hour from Florence, just towards the coast, towards Pisa. It's a magical little city and it's so like pretty, and you'll have a much more kind of sort of, you know, authentic or slow or less touristic experience staying in a city like that that's not too far away from the main places, but at the same time isn't, you know, as full, if that makes sense.
Yes. If you had only one day or say half a day and you were in Florence, what's something you would tell someone that you have to do besides going for that lovely evening walk?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it depends on what you want to do. Like, people come for the Uffizi and the Accademia, which is where the David statue is, and that's, you know, very famed. And if you want to see those artistic treasures, I would say definitely book your tickets in advance, go early, and get there, you know, and see it. But what else would I want to do? I mean, there's galleries like Palazzo Strozzi I love. It's in a beautiful old palace, but it's more modern art, which I find quite interesting. They have different sort of exhibitions on the go. What else would I like? I don't know. Truffles are quite popular here in terms of Tuscany, and there's a beautiful place called Procacci, which is on Via Tornabuoni, which is one of the posh streets of Florence. It's a bit like the Bond Street of Florence with all the, you know, the Gucci's and the Pucci's and the Prada shops. But they even go for a glass of Prosecco and have a little truffle sandwich in this kind of rather refined, little kind of wine bar. And something like that's quite fun if you like your food. In these days as well, in the summertime, they have even like boat rides down the Arno, and that's quite fun. So the River Arno is the river that cuts through the city from north to south. And in these sort of warmer months, you can take like a river cruise. It's like in a small boat, though. It's not like a large boat. Down the river under the famous Ponte Vecchio Bridge. And that's a beautiful way to see the city and all its sort of iconic landmarks.
Wow. And it must be just a remarkable way to spend your time at the moment with the weather being so lovely. And I know that you said you were staying among vineyards.
Yes, I'm in Chianti at the moment. I'm about 30 minutes south of Florence at the moment, on the road between Strada and Greve in Chianti, which is a famous wine region. Probably a lot of people know red wine, but it's really beautiful. I mean, the great thing again about Florence is quite a small city, so literally within 15 minutes in a car, you are literally outside the city walls and you're in rolling hills with vineyards and little castles perched at top of hills and like lined with cypress trees. It's pretty picturesque, I have to say. Oh, I can think of worse places to wake up in the morning, Oh, so no, it's very beautiful. And I can see why people love Italy and want to keep coming back, or at least come once in their lifetime. So I do encourage people to travel here. But like I said, my big thing is go slow, stay a few nights, maybe, stay at local, boutique hotels where you can put your money back into the economy. That's a great thing to do. And then also get the intel from the locals on where, to eat, drink and shop. And also get my book if you need a resource. I always recommend it. And then also go to some of the lesser traveled towns, which are so beautiful. I mean, even 2 weekends ago, I went on Sunday for a drive down to Siena, which is still quite a famous and popular town, but less than Florence. But it's so beautiful. It's got its main square dates back to the late 1200s, so the 13th century. It's lots of cobbled streets and, beautiful churches and good shopping as well. And it was a beautiful Sunday. It was gorgeous. Like I got to skip around Siena on a Sunday just because, and that's something nice to do.
I remember being there on a moped, and for someone who's come from this part of the world too and hadn't been there before, it is a remarkable, historic, just stunningly beautiful part of the world. So we're going to wrap up now. So just tell us, the question we ask all of our guests is, what is the most bizarre situation you've found yourself in during your travels?
It's funny, actually, because I don't know, when I think back, everything seems just wonderful. Maybe it's my positive spirit. But when I think of that question, something I think about was about 15 years ago. I was traveling through Southeast Asia for 3 months, just backpacking with an old boyfriend. And we did Thailand and Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, which was fantastic. And this was again, back in the day when we were in Cambodia, where we would have a limit of $5 American a night to stay in accommodation. We got quite good stuff, actually, quite good commo. And we just did it where are we going tomorrow? Okay, let's get this bus. And this was before smartphones. So you had to read The Lonely Planet that you'd find in a cafe that someone had left behind, and go to a travel agent in some sort of hut and say, where's the next bus to wherever. Anyway, I remember we went to Siem Reap and we went to see the Angkor Wat temples. And this was before you had to pay an entry fee and before there was any sort of gated kind of way to enter. It was pretty, it wasn't Wild West in a bad way, but it was open, basically. So the kind of thing back then is you basically get a local to be a private driver for the day for $10 American. And we got picked up at 5 a.m. in his little tuk-tuk, and he took us to the temples. And the main temple in Angkor Wat, which you know from most of the iconic photos, is very, very beautiful. So we got dropped off there at about 5:30 at this point. And you could just walk up and literally climb on it back then. And as the sun was coming up, we just explored, and there was something very magical about this whole experience of being in this sort of foreign Southeast Asian country, seeing the sunrise on these temples that date back, to the 600s or 700s. And we turned a corner and went to a little area where we could see this group of people all dressed in white in a circle meditating, which was really, again, quite sort of added to the magical spirit, I guess. So we kind of climbed down the stones and we just joined them and ended up basically seeing the sunrise at Angkor Wat with these bunch of random but lovely meditative people all dressed in white. And then after it was finished, we just left and kept exploring and went to the other temples. And yeah, it was just amazing. And so I feel really lucky that I've always had a sense of adventure, but also had the luck to travel to a lot of places, especially before they were very touristic, and really sort of see them for what they were. I don't know, maybe in my past life I was an explorer, like in the 1800s or something. I do feel that sometimes. Like, where do I get this sort of like excitement just to see and do and travel? But it's in me, it's in my soul. I can't get rid of it. So
thanks so much for that, Nadia, and it's just been so great talking to you. And we'll put all the links to your book and your website on the show notes.
So who's booking their tickets to Florence right now? I know I am. That was author Nadia Plumridge, who was chatting with Kirsty, and you can find Nadia's book Lost in Florence on her website, which is lostinflorence.it, and we'll also include it on our script notes at theworldawaits.au. And that brings to a close The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods, and you can find us at theworldawaits.au. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram and Facebook. That's KIRSTIE Writes. And where can people find you, Belle?
You'll find me at globalsalsa.com or Instagram on global_salsa. Thanks for listening. See you next week.